Speaker is Kasia Malinowska, also known as Malinowska-Sempruch. She is a doctor of public health, I believe, and the director of the Global Drug Policy Program, Open Society Foundations. She's also on the faculty of the New School, and she will be speaking about global drug policy and psychedelics. Kasia?
Hi all. Okay, this looks right. Hello everyone. It's so fantastic to be with people. Yes, an experience I missed for quite some time, as did everyone else. So let me start by saying thank you for the 4:20 slot, Kevin. I think that's just perfect for me. And also by expressing gratitude for all of your work. I'm Polish. I grew up in Poland, came to the US when I was 18. And as Ethan Nadelman, who is here, reminded me, as I was walking in today, he said, "Remember when I tried to get you high 20 years ago? That was hard." And it's true, because I grew up in a society where drugs were a Western invention that did terrible things to you. So we like alcohol and use way too much of it, but other substances not so much, and they have actually quite heavy political sort of negative stamp. So when I turned to some of you in a time of crisis in my life, and you helped on multiple levels. It helped to stabilize my life, for which I really thank you. And you also helped me sort of move on from a very sort of post-communist thinking about drugs. And Ethan did too, 20 years ago. So thank you for that. And now I'm here because I want to ask for more. I want to ask for more because I think psychedelic world is, and a voice of psychedelic world is needed in international. Let me just stress this international drug policy world, and I will explain why. So 30 years ago, 3 decades ago, as a college student, I engaged with the AIDS epidemic here in the United States. AIDS activism was compelling to me. Because it was a right cause, and also because it was so inclusive. My ACT UP t-shirt that I still wear has a logo on the side here, which says, "Africa is burning." Activists from New York, Paris, and elsewhere had a vision to fight stigma, to fight for medicines, not only for them, but for everyone else in the world. Once the issue of availability of antiretrovirals was mostly solved here in the US, they fought very hard to make sure that the entire global South has access to them as well. And that really spoke to me. And they prevailed. Global Fund was created, people do have access to HIV treatment. And it is that AIDS community that also taught me about harm reduction. They taught me about needle exchange, about methadone programs, about meeting your client exactly where your client is, not where you would like him to be, he or her to be. And as I spent next decade at OSF, an organization I work for, expanding harm reduction programs in Kyrgyzstan, Russia, China, my own country, Poland, and elsewhere, those lessons from AIDS activists rang very true, and they do today as well. So what became apparent to me as I was a funder and supporter of expanding harm reduction programs was that you can have the best public health intervention on the planet, and people really need it and want it. But if you have a police officer standing outside on the corner what will happen is that people will not access those services. That criminal justice will get in the way of public health. We know that quite clearly. Let's look at 100,000 people who died of overdose in the United States over the last year. The same is true if you are a mom who is a drug user, active drug user, and self-identifying as such by walking into a needle exchange program threatens your motherhood because your child could be taken away. So it became, so sort of from this world of AIDS activism through harm reduction, I sort of made my way into drug policy and drug policy reform. And that's the space that I'm speaking to you from right now. I often hear about how the intention of psychedelic renaissance is to make world a better place. And that's beautiful, a better place for us all. And that's beautiful and admirable. What I do not hear as much is how the world we live in impacts on the prospects of the work that you do. And I'll explain what I mean. Sorry to be a bit of a bummer, but everything we do here and talk about here has a relationship to the international drugs regime. And this is a conversation that's missing. The Second Convention of 1971 put a number of drugs we're discussing here in Schedule 1. And 189 countries ratified those conventions. And discussions, how will we deal with it, are missing. This is hard international law. And I think those conversations need to be had. So this is what the international regime looks like. And I can talk about this for hours. But there are three takeaways here for you all. It is complex, and it is very interdependent. 2, there is a large building in Vienna that is housing an institution that is called UNODC, which is right in the middle there, United Nations Drug Control Program. It is staffed by hundreds of people, and its governing body is something that is called CND, Commission on Narcotic Drugs, right to the right of it. And 3, health inputs, something that you are discussing here so passionately, health inputs into this entire process are minimal. If you see here, World Health Assembly, World Health Organization, somewhere to the side. And actually very limited opportunity for that body to make a dent on what is mostly drug control agency that 189 countries signed up to. So why is CND important? Why is Commission on Narcotic Drugs important? It's important because and this is an example. Reasons are many, but here's one example. In 1995, China made it known that they are coming to the CND to schedule ketamine on Schedule 1, substance with no medicinal purpose. And to the left, you have an explanation that China provided for that move. INCB report, International Narcotic Control Board, put out a report which served an international institution that served as basis for that decision. So here's what happened. What happened was that international drug policy organizations mobilized an impressive action, an impressive sign-on letter in response to that. Oh, one more point, that this decision or this suggestion happened even though WHO has spoken quite a lot about the value of ketamine and basically said that that wouldn't be a good idea. So based on that WHO advice, here are 6 international drug policy organizations that sort of really very quickly started to mobilize by engaging with national governments, by putting together a quite impressive sign-on letter. And I want to talk to you about this letter for one reason. Take a look how many institutions stepped up once someone mobilized them. For example, Oxfam, Save the Children, European League Against Pain, African Palliative Care Association, Indian Society for Study of Pain, Surgical Society of Ethiopia, but nowhere on that list do we have psychedelic organizations. And I think it's really important that we as a group take up that cause and engage and capacitate ourselves and fund in that space, so next, when China returns, and it will return, there will be many other people that are competent to push back. So let me just end with this. In that professional journey that I outlined for you, I heard from cannabis advocates how it's okay, we should legalize cannabis because it's not heroin, because at least they're not junkies. I hear from methadone, I hear from some of folks here in psychedelic community how methadone is a synthetic opioid and people are on it for years and it's not great. I really think that we need to start thinking about drug policy movement as a commitment that we all have to social justice, to healing, and to personal freedom. Few international drug policy organizations, So let me just end because I'm running out of time. Let me just end with the following: that if we think about this common intent and common agenda, which is comprised of those three issues. And I think it will be possible for us to really amplify each other's voices, support each other, and create an environment in which psychedelic movement is seriously invested in well-being of your goals and agendas, and also goals and agendas of others. Thank you.
I was backstage for a minute and I heard clapping and I was like, oh no, and I ran out because I thought Kasia was done. But you guys were just clapping at something else. Anyway, yes, stay here because we're going to want to ask you some questions. Kasia, you and I have known each other a long time. And I don't know if you were around with Linda Smith in the 90s, the Linda Smith Center, but I was. And when I first got to the city, I was doing needle exchange, not exactly through Drug Policy Alliance, but we were going in the same crowds. But what I heard really early on was that George Soros will fund drug policy reform and harm reduction and even needle exchange, but he doesn't want to hear about psychedelics. He doesn't want to talk about psychedelics. It's not on the table. It's not on the agenda. Has that changed?
I think that's my mic. That's my mic, yes. Okay, so let me just take it off.
Good idea.
So I think, has that changed? Well, we actually, believe it or not, funded a little bit in psychedelic space. I mean, as Rick Doblin will know, we actually provided small funding to MAPS a number of years ago to bring folks from communities of color to the big conference. We also contributed to train communities of color in psychedelic therapy. I think the first training actually that MAP did that was specific to to that community. So I think I don't see a situation in which we will fund psychedelics as such, but I think we will support efforts in which issues of social justice are impacting that community. And you know, when you think, Julie, when you think about funding and how funding is sort of made available across the world, you know, needle exchange or social justice trauma that happens in the Philippines continue to be underfunded, while actually psychedelics seem to be doing quite well.
Good point.
And so I would say, you know, there's so little money for the sort of more controversial aspects of drug policy work that I think we will sort of stay true to that commitment. And again, if there are issues that would help diversity of the psychedelic movements, that's where the opportunity lies.
Good. I think that's a great answer, and that really does sort of make a lot of sense. One more quick question is, who are like the other countries that you think are really doing it right that we should maybe be looking toward if, say, we're not doing it right?
Well, I think in terms of psychedelic movement itself.
In terms of drug policy.
Right. So you know, I'm looking actually to Europe with some disappointment, because I think what we have done, or what we have seen in Europe, is that things are not awful, and if things are not awful, then, you know, why change them if it's so politically costly?
Yeah.
But I think we now are seeing Germany come online, right? Portugal expanding. I would say that, you know, US definitely has it right when it comes to cannabis regulation. The movement around psychedelics is fantastic, and it's inspiring others. So the question is, how do people share what they've learned in a way that is useful to the broader world? You know, this may sound a little corny, but, you know, I keep thinking, for example, of people in Poland that are heavily traumatized by sort of communist past. And I will, you know, and I include in that my own family. My dad was a political prisoner. You know, I visited ketamine clinics yesterday in New York, and they're beautiful. But yeah. When will they be accessible to? When will those treatments be accessible to, right, you know, to the rest of the world? So I think, you know, it's that spirit of international community that I think we should really nurture, and, you know, and make sure that everyone gets a pie. And that's why I really, you know, I think of ACT-UP and AIDS with so much affection, because they've done it. You know, they brought AIDS drugs to the world, and I hope that's how we're going to think about psychedelic treatment in 30 years too.
Nice, that's great. I'm assuming we have questioners ready. I actually have a poll right between me and the microphone, so I'm just going to act on faith and go ahead and ask for the question.
So I'll start. Thank you, Kasia. I think a lot of people can visualize what activism looks like more at a local or national level, and it was interesting to hear today from, for instance, Tom in Oregon, who successfully, with his white luxury, you know, brought real political change to fruition within their state. What is it that you recommend of people in this audience or people in the community to create international policy change, which I think is harder for people to visualize how to put their hands on?
Thanks, Kevin. So there are a number of international organizations that actually, I think, would love membership of psychedelic groups from the US. I would say that, you know, look them up. International Drug Policy Consortium is one of them. There's TNI. There are a bunch of folks out there that show up in Vienna, that show up every March and fight that fight. I think if you become a member, if you say that you are interested in participating in that discussion, that would be great. Now, you can also do something amazingly useful, which is reach out, try to, you know, as a psychedelic community, see whether you can meet with the US representatives to the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And tell them, look, all of this is happening in our countries. We want US government to A, be aware of it, be supportive, 3, defend it when China tries to do what it tried to do with ketamine. So I think there's plenty to be done. You just need to be really willing to get on a plane, engage with those international groups to make sure that you are visible. And folks that are funding in the psychedelic space, think about Philippines, think about Africa, think about places where you would like to bring your wisdom to, and make sure that those people are funded as well.
One more question.
Hi. My question is, can we separate fighting a global war on drugs from an opposition of a global, like the global hegemony of neoliberal economics and political ideologies, which largely have driven the existence of these global drug policies and our enforcement of global drug policies?
Wow. Can we separate it? No. But can we do harm reduction? Yes, right? And so I mean policy harm reduction, and make sure that we identify wins for ourselves that are reachable and actually go after them. So yes, I mean, I think colonialism is a huge problem. There's much in terms of global politics that drives the war on drugs, but I do think we can find spaces where change can happen, and we see those spaces. And all of you guys are are an example of this space.
Thank you.
All right, that's a great note to end on. But we're not done. But you're done. Thank you, Kasia Malinowska-Sempruch.